Jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. Welcome, everybody, to PBJamz. Music and picture books. What a perfect sandwich. Squish them all together. What a yummy snack.
Good morning or afternoon, evening, whenever it is that you are joining us for this episode of PBJamz, I have a special treat. And as you may or may not know, this is our third anniversary episode of PBJamz. So woohoo, we are celebrating. This is episode 67, I think it is. So I have been doing this for 66 episodes. And for this year, I love how the timing worked out because I have a musician who's joined us today. This is Grace Ludtke. Hi, Grace.
Hello.
I'm so happy to have you. You see Grace's heart behind her. So Grace is a musician. She's a teaching musician. And I came to know about Grace actually from my best friend who lives up in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And she gets Our State Magazine, which is a magazine for North Carolina. And it'll talk about all the fun places to eat and visit. And there was an article in that magazine that featured Grace and her journey to music and whatever. And so it talked about how Grace came to music because of a picture book. And so my best friend was like, oh, I think you need to read this article. And so she sent it to me. And I did read the article. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. Like, this is exactly what PBJamz is all about. So I contacted Grace at her work and I said, would you be interested in coming and talking about this journey that you've been on that really all started with the picture book and has brought her absolutely full circle? And I was so excited that she agreed and super excited that it landed on this anniversary episode. So we're going to talk all things picture books, music, inspiration, full circle journeys, and all of that. So thanks again, Grace, for being here.
Oh, yes. I'm so honored to be here, Tawny.
So excited to have you. So let's talk about that beginning. So obviously your journey to music started with the picture book. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It did. So when I was contacted by Our State, who's interested in interviewing me and doing an article for their May issue last year, I was thinking, oh my gosh, they're probably going to ask me like how I started as a musician. And I'm like, I started because I read a picture book. And I always had thought that was kind of an odd thing. In reading interviews of other musicians or like hearing their interviews, it seemed like they always talked about how they were inspired by going to a concert when they were young or a child and hearing the sound of the instrument that they later chose in life, or that they grew up in a musical family, or they had aunts or uncles or brothers or sisters or moms or dads that were all professional musicians. And I'm like, my story is so different. I'm like, well, you know what? I should just honor this aspect of my relationship to music and my early beginnings. And I'm going to go in that interview and I'm going to tell my story of how it all came to be. I don't have to pretend to be like anyone else. So it was very gratifying when you reached out to me. And I was like, I had no earthly idea all my life that I was a success story of picture books with musical hooks. I had no idea. So it's amazing to be here and to kind of have my childhood story honored in that way.
Yeah.
So I moved, well, here's how to start it all. So I started piano lessons when I was in the second grade. So that was my first introduction to music in general. So when I was on a shopping trip with my mother, we were literally shopping for windows for our house because it was an historic home and it needed new windows. And of course, what 9-year-old child is going to be interested in shopping for literal windows with their mother? So I went over to the children's section that was there in the store and I picked up a book. And I so vividly remember this story that I read and how it resonated with me. And of course, there was a picture in it of a woman that was playing the harp. And I remember going up to my mom and saying, Mom, I want to learn how to play the harp. So in that moment, kind of everything came together of me as a 9-year-old with my interest in music and my resignation with that story. And after you contacted me, I really looked back and I thought about that story. And I'm like, how did I connect with that story so deeply as a 9-year-old? And I don't remember the title of the book. I don't remember the author, but I remember the story. And I'm going to share the story too that I remember. But if anybody is familiar with this book that is watching, remember, this is from the brain of a 9-year-old. So if it is somewhat inaccurate, which it could be because I'm remembering it from a childhood memory, but I remember the parts, I remember the whole like plot line of the book. So I sat down in this children's book section, and I was pretty tall kind of as a 9-year-old, and so I fit very largely into the seat that I was sitting in, like looking through the books. And so there was a book that was hardcover that I opened up, and it was a story about musicians that lived in this high-rise apartment in this city. And it went through in the beginning of kind of the introduction of like each musician and playing their instrument, and they're all kind of isolated in their apartments. So it's, this instrument, that instrument. I actually don't remember what other instruments were in there, but there was a blonde woman in a colored dress that was playing the harp. And that picture really stood out to me. So these musicians were there living in this apartment building, and one day the air conditioning broke in the building. So all of them opened up their windows so they could still practice, but with a cool breeze coming in. And the sound that came out of that apartment complex was horrible. Thinking about all of these different instruments that are practicing, that are not together, playing all this weird stuff. And then someone had the idea of, hey, let's all come outside and let's all play together. And then it sounded really good. Yeah. And so the end of the book was them all coming together for their first performance together, now friends, playing music together in the town square. Mm-hmm. So that is the premise of the story that I remember. And of course, the woman playing the harp, like that was going to be me.
Of course. Yeah.
I know. I don't recall there being a pianist in the book.
Right.
It's pretty hard to take a piano to a town square.
True that, yes.
Yeah. So that's what I remember. And then I reflected back as to what was going on in my life then, like as a 9-year-old. So like, how did this story really like speak to me? And I thought back like as an adult to my child brain. Okay, like how could these be correlated? But at that time, I was actually new to North Carolina. My family, my mother's side of the family, I'm a 12th generation North Carolinian on my mother's side of the family. So we've kind of my family has lived in like the same kind of Catawba County aspect of North Carolina region for a really long time. Yeah. But my mom met my dad there in Catawba County, who's from Wisconsin, and they got married and they moved out to the Midwest.
Oh.
And so I lived there until the 2nd grade before my parents made the decision to bring us back to North Carolina to, be a part of this big extended family that we have there, which was wonderful and enriching. But here I was in a new school in a small town, and I had a Midwestern accent. Mm. And all the kids in the 2nd grade, I remember they told me that they had known each other since kindergarten.
Right.
So as a 2nd grader, knowing each other since kindergarten is forever.
It is.
Just think of how the distance between Christmas every year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, these kids have been together their entire life. And there wasn't a lot of different people coming into the town. A lot of the kids literally had been together since they were small children.
Yeah.
And so they weren't particularly welcoming of
Yep.
new kids coming into the class. And so I wasn't invited to the birthday parties that they talked about. I wasn't invited to the play dates. I was this weird, awkward kid in the second grade in this new school where all these people knew each other except for me. And I also had some type of like speech thing where I couldn't pronounce my R's, like everything turned into a W. So that just made me a lot more different.
Right.
So, but I think that when I started piano, I kind of found a place and a connection with my teacher where I started to kind of discover this other aspect of myself. And when I reflect back on thinking about that story, it's these people that are isolated in this building that are lonely, that don't know each other. And because of this serendipitous situation where the air conditioner breaks, they all step out and get to know each other and become friends and share a musical experience together. And of course, as a second grader, you're not in band or anything like that, or necessarily you can form friendships yet through music. And so I think that in seeing that in the book, like this big, beautiful instrument here could allow me to step out and to build relationships with other people. And then I think about my career too as a harpist, like what I've done for the past 15 years with the North Carolina Harp Ensemble, which they have, what they featured in the magazine, is I've been bringing harpists together to learn together, because the harp can be a very isolating instrument. In an orchestra, you're usually the only one. Yeah. And so to build relationships, to form friendships, I thought that the North Carolina Harp Ensemble was something that could benefit everyone musically. And so it started out as just kind of a passion project and just something that I've enjoyed to do for so long. So when our state reached out, I was like, what? Interested in the harp ensemble. But I love playing with the group and organizing the group and meeting all the young talent as well as adult talent that comes to our group of people that are really passionate about this instrument like I am. And so it's just been a really fun journey being a part of all of that. So that was a really long story. So thank you for listening.
Oh, that's a fabulous story. And I think, so for one thing, I always love in every conversation on PBJamz, like we always have planned things that we're going to talk about, but there's always a little underlying theme that kind of bubbles up to the surface. And that idea of belonging, and being a part of something bigger than yourself, and that antidote to loneliness. Like, I mean, I already hear that bubbling up, and that is so true for music in the public schools. I think it's definitely a role that music plays, but also we see that as picture book authors, those of us who are in the writing world. Like when you first come in, you come in as a lone writer, you are by yourself and you're sitting at your desk and you have this dream and you're just there, but you quickly discover that there are so many people just like you doing the same thing. And then you come together and you form critique groups and you form these other organizations that do exactly what you're talking about with the harp ensemble. They give you a chance to share your passion and not feel alone, and to share community around something that you love and are passionate about. And so I think that is a beautiful theme emerging in this episode.
Yeah, and ideas and feedback. And I mean, we can't think that we know everything. And sometimes you're sharing like a little like tidbit of information. It's like the light bulb goes off and it's like, that is what this needs. Or with you, that is the word.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Or that's the hole in this plot. That's exactly what,
Yeah. And so I think it's important as an artist or writer that you're able to be in a community where you can kind of, sharpen your blade in a sense and get the feedback that you need. And what I love about the harp ensemble is that there are professional harpists that are there, and there are also student harpists. And so there's a whole body of mentorship that's established in that also.
Yeah, and that's another layer that's also important. And so I think another element that's rising to the surface is that as artists, even though it's very different being a musician and playing the harp as opposed to being a writer or an author illustrator, but there are things that we do have in common as artists, and those are the kind of things that we're talking about. This need for feedback and this need for, sharing passion and coming together and pulling those ideas and understanding that there are people that are, and the same thing's true in the picture book community. Like there are people that have been, I mean, they've already published, 40 books or whatever, but they're reaching down and picking up somebody who hasn't published any books yet, and they're sharing their knowledge. And, whether
Yeah.
that's through a class or just on Twitter, or, well, I guess it's X now, but it'll always be Twitter to me. So, wherever that is on social media or in classes that they are sharing. And a lot of our critique groups are like that. Like our local group has people that are just starting out on their writing journey, and then people that have already published several books, people that have agents and people that don't. And so those layers really help an ensemble, whether you're talking musically or as a group of writers, really helps balance them out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you can always learn so much from somebody that has walked the path that you are interested in walking,
absolutely.
because you can learn from all the information that they give you. And so, the more that you learn, the more that you're able to share with other people. So that's great that there are writers there that have published books that can give you tips and tricks and
Yeah.
connections and all those things that you need to do to get your voice out there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I love also in this episode that, I think from the minute I heard your story, what I thought and what I really wanted to share was that for the people who are writing picture books like I am, that our picture books may one day spark somebody like that one did for you, and that the
Yeah.
words that we're putting on paper now might be the key to somebody else opening up the door to their dream, whatever that is, whether we're writing about science or music or whatever that theme is, that one day some kid, who's lonely or frustrated or just primed and ready for that dream is going to open that book and see an illustration or some words, and the door is just going to open and they're going to go, this is what I want to do, this is who I want
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah, because you were always, as little kids, are always looking for information. And
Yeah,
storytelling is like the very beginning of how we start to teach, well, everything.
everything.
Everything. Like everything is learned better when you involve it in a storyline.
Yeah,
So, but I mean, that's our first instinct to what it means to be a human being and the experience of being human and understanding emotional context and all those things. I mean, it can be so greatly learned through reading a beautiful, well-crafted picture book in ways that it cannot be reached through media,
right, right.
because it ignites a part of the brain. I feel like that is not just about entertainment. It's about something deeper than that, where they're actually like focused and dialed in experiencing the story, and they tangibly like have it in their hands. They establish this physical connection with the book, just like you would establish a physical connection with an instrument that you
Right.
play. And when you're talking about what's on media and such, sometimes you just can't reach people in that same way.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said before we got official. And so Grace was talking about how she approaches her music more as a storyteller. And I think this is a good place to talk about that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that feels like and looks like to you?
Yes. So I have loved literature since I was a little kid. And so there are so many aspects to that. So first is each instrument, the way that it is, a composer uses it in a ballet or an opera in particular, a lot of times it's establishing a particular emotional sound or a character.
Right.
And so when all my favorite things that I have played have always been operas and ballets because I get to be a character. My harp is not just music, it is a character and it's there amplifying the story. So the different roles that the harp, I found the harp plays in operas and also ballets, is it always has the love themes.
Oh, yeah.
So, when the harp starts playing, a lot of times in operas, they are singing about how much they love each other, or even loving connections between parents and children, or loving connections between couples. And then the harp appears when they appear, and the music is underneath, and the harp appears, they appear. So that's very common.
Yeah, yeah.
So is the harp as a love theme. The harp also, with all the glissandos that it does, it's very well known for like the glissandos or goes, that is very magical. So when there is a magical, transformative thing happening, the harp is there in these, glissandos or arpeggios that are kind of leading through this like magical transformation. And it also depicts heaven, of course. And you think of the correlation between angels and the harp.
Yes.
You find that all the time in things. Right. And also there's one opera that I did called Dialogue of the Carmelites, where the harp represented death and the ascension into heaven. And so it was these Carmelite nuns that were martyrs. And so they were all killed at the guillotine. And so during this particular part in the opera, once I realized what was going on, I started to cry because I had this like death march that was happening. And then it was the first time I've ever like cried in the pit. I have tears in my eyes. I'm playing as these women are marching to their death. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, wow. So it's just so interesting to see what it plays into. And not just the harp, but what the other type of instruments represent as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's just incredibly clever what some of these composers have done and kind of this character arc that these different instruments play. And one of the things that I did a while back was I did what was called a fairy tale concert series.
Oh, nice.
And there was a harpist that I met in New York who was doing these storytelling with harp and usually like an additional instrument to tell Hans Christian Andersen stories and Brothers Grimm. And do you need a cough drop?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Brothers Grimm tales. And I just thought what she was doing was so clever. And so my best friend and I, who is now a leader in the arts community in North Carolina, put together these shows that we did for school children. So like some of like the Hans Christian Andersen works were like The Valiant Little Tailor, The Six Swans, The Golden Bird, The Frog Prince. But these Brother Grimm's ones were real clever because she added that additional instrument component. So the Brothers Grimm story of the Nightingale, of course, that was with flute depicting the bird. And then you have The Emperor's New Clothes, which was with the trombone.
Oh, funny.
You think about the emperor, and then I was like, I guess a trumpet maybe could have worked, but that's much too regal because the emperor in the story is kind of like a clown, a buffoon type person. So like the trombone can make some really weird noises.
Right.
Like, it's so interesting. And then the Ugly Duckling, which you can do with French horn or English horn.
Right.
So depicting like the duck. And then the story of the Tinderbox, where you have violin and harp. And what's interesting there is that Stravinsky used the violin also to depict the tale of a soldier. He has a piece called The Soldier's Tale, where it's the violin that is remnant of the soldier. And I thought, you know what, that is so interesting, because out of all the string instruments, in the story of the tinderbox, the soldier is a young man. So, and the violin has that highest voice.
Yeah.
So of course they're not going to do the viola or the cello or the bass. So I'm like, I guess the violin kind of is like the youngest, kind of, you could think of that as like a young soldier type of sound.
Right.
So it's really interesting, the work that she did, but we performed all of them. So we ran out of material.
I love that though.
Yeah. So, but I just thought that was so, but the harp is more in the role there as like a film score. So it's music underneath of what the storyteller is saying. So it's much more of a theatrical type of thing than it is a concert. So, because you're kind of reacting to what's going on with the story and underlying, the different moments in the story. So it's more film score-esque, I would say. But that was a really fun project to work on.
So did you guys like read the story and then the music was going behind the reading?
Yes. Sometimes. And sometimes it was just the storyteller or the actor. And then you would do the sounds like in a film score, where trying to think, like, I know in the tinderbox there was a kiss between like the princess and the soldier, and so and when the storyteller said kiss, then the harp goes
right
that moment.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly clever material.
How fun. Yeah. That sounds so
awesome.
awesome.
But that's just a really interesting way to connect storytelling and music all kind of combined into one thing. But then, unlike the story that I read when I was a little kid that inspired me, I mean, that resonated very specifically, I think, with, the pointing me in the direction that I was kind of meant to go. So, but I think it would be really cool one day to do something like that, but more in a context that was more focused on a musical journey as opposed to the just classic tales.
Yeah.
I should tell that to Alyssa.
Yeah. So one of the books that Grace and I had talked about when we were talking about doing this episode is the book Because by Mo Willems. And I think that's very applicable to what you're saying right now. Like the whole, like if you're not familiar, viewers, Because it's this huge cause and effect circular story. And so somebody is supposed to go to a concert and they can't go, and so their ticket gets passed on to somebody else, and then it's just this huge circular effect. And what happens is, much like Grace, this person who got to go and watch that concert then becomes a musician. And so that full circle aspect of this, and the whole idea of story being a part of the musical journey, I think that's very apropos as well.
Yeah. So I loved the story because, and at first I kind of, when I was first going through it, I didn't like understand it kind of in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then by the end, I was like, I think it's tears.
I know.
And I'm like,
yeah.
No, but it just shows like how enmeshed we really all are. Even if we like feel we're like an individual, this isolated type of thing. I mean, there's so much more involved in our story. So many people, so many things that we sometimes like don't appreciate really at that moment, that really can like change the course of things. I loved how they also said in that book, like, because of a flyer, like, because that someone sat there and made a flyer where to put up to advertise this event, and they might have not been a musician, they're just, graphic artists putting together a flyer. But to think that someone sitting there making a flyer could change the life path of someone is just amazing. To think how these little tiny things can really like change the course of your life and, shape your whole career path or your life journey. These little minute things. Yeah. Whether it be catching a cold or seeing a flyer. And I loved also in that book how she talked about hard work, because she worked very, very hard. Because being a musician, being a writer is not an easy path to take. We do it because we love it.
Yeah.
There is beauty in that struggle and that reach to create something that is really beautiful and meaningful to be able to put out into the world. And then it also talked about a little bit of luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is so important too, because they say, when preparation meets opportunity, I mean, that's when things, start to happen. So we have to appreciate the discipline and the effort it takes, and the teachers and everything that come into that nurture us and mold us, as well as that aspect of just getting real lucky sometimes where like, wow, the path just really kind of came to me at the right moment. Like I never thought that Our State Magazine would have an interest in a harp teacher.
Yeah.
Really loves harp music. And, because of that, I am connected to you. I'm on this podcast. Last Sunday, I played at the Weymouth Center for the Arts and Humanities. Are you familiar with that just beautiful space? And it's the home of a very famous writer where they've had a writing residency for over 40 years, home to the Literary Hall of Fame. I'm like, they saw the article and they invited my trio to come, which is flute, cello, and harp. And so that was just a really fun opportunity to know that that article resonated with people that were like, wait, harp that could be pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, those full circle moments and that little bit of luck. I mean, that's so true, for sure. And I think we know that like with the Hollywood, with the actors and but it's also equally true, for us as writers. And we talk often about how, you can write the greatest book in the world. I mean, it could be incredible. It could have the best words and the best pictures. But if there's not somebody who wants it, then it's not going to go anywhere. And there really is this cosmic thing that has to happen where you have to write just the right book at just the right time and get it to just the right person in just the right moment for it to resonate with them. And I mean, if they read it 6 months too soon or 6 months too late, it's not gonna land the same depending on what's going on in their heart and their mind and the market and all the things. And probably the same thing true. I mean, I know musically in terms of like auditions for big parts and things like that. Like we all depend on that little bit of luck to get us that last little section.
Yeah.
We can do all the work and all the preparation and know our craft and do it impeccably. But until that little bit of luck comes into play, it's not going to get us all the way to the finish line.
Yeah, when that right opportunity presents itself. So, and sometimes you just like have to wait. I know that in like the classical music world, a lot of people's music is not appreciated until after they die.
Right.
And so I've read tons of things of composers that are like, I feel like nobody has appreciated my music, and then they pass away, and then all of a sudden, poof, everybody loves all their stuff. For example, J.S. Bach.
Right.
One of the most famous Baroque composers ever, like he, felt that his music wasn't appreciated. And now it's like gold
throughout
the whole world. And then so
Right.
it's interesting to see like what comes back, like what people rediscover and say, oh, this is really great. And then, you read back to the premiere of it and people are like, oh, what is that? And then, 100 years later, people are like, what?
Yeah. Sometimes it's just a little too cutting edge at the very beginning, and then later people come to really appreciate that when thoughts have mellowed and things like that. And then sometimes, people there have been so many stories of musicians and writers that have died, and artists, a lot of artists as well, like visual artists that have died paupers, and just
Mhm.
had like no recognition, no money in return for all the hard work. But later on down the line, it comes into popularity. So there are so many factors, and very much like the book, because it's very dependent upon that specific circle of events that have to happen in order for all those pieces to come together. And
Yeah.
sometimes it happens early and sometimes it happens
Yeah.
late.
And some people can, during their lifetime, can experience just incredible success. People love their music. And then people forget about it.
Yeah, fades into oblivion quickly.
So, what
Yeah.
is that Mozart counterpart?
Yeah.
Whoever that guy is was real popular during his lifetime. And then afterwards, people are like, no. See, I can't even remember his name. I think it started with an S.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know.
So it's just amazing to think about that. And also, there's certain art too that doesn't withstand the test of time. And so it just kind of becomes irrelevant to where it just doesn't resonate with the people's experience now,
Right.
and can come across as somewhat abrasive or unkind. Like there's stories like that are out there too, where you're like,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear those and to think about, like, wow, like people didn't really think that back then that was weird. But nowadays they're like, what?
What were they doing? What were they thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even some of the grim tales that you were talking about earlier, like if you go back to the original fairy tales as they were written from Hans Christian Andersen
Oh
and
yeah,
Grimm
they're
brothers,
changed a bit to be more,
a lot, yeah, a lot
yeah,
different than
into what more presentable for today's public. It's not
right.
like the dark aspect of things.
But I think at the time when they were writing, like things were much harder and life was much more difficult, and that was reflective of their experience during that time, Whereas now it's like, yeah, not so much. So we
Yeah.
do have to adapt and change. I mean, even the Mother Goose rhymes, many of them have gone through some, transitions of their own. So I think it's important to expose kids, though, to those. And I think that's something that falls by the wayside sometimes because it'll become, a little bit out of vogue and people just cast that aside. But there's so much of our canon of music and literature and stuff that goes back and refers back to those things. I think it's important for kids to have a reference point for those things, even
Mm.
if we have to do some shifting. And, I think it's important that they understand Mary had a little lamb. I mean, like we were talking earlier, you guys weren't part of that
Yes.
conversation. So, but Grace was saying that one of the kids that she performed for was like, well, can you play some classical music like Mary Had a Little Lamb?
Yes.
But it is, it's their point of reference. But
Mm.
many of those things do show up in our literature and in movies. And in order to understand that, they do need to have some semblance of understanding of where that stuff, came
Yeah. So
from.
a lot of times when there's something like that, you have to look at it in a historical context, like what was going on during that time in the world. Why were people thinking that way? I mean, one piece that came to mind that has been banned certain places where they don't teach it anymore is a Debussy piece that's actually really lively and fun called Gollywog's Cakewalk.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So, but he wrote a children's corner suite where it depict all these dolls coming to, well, all these toys coming to life in his daughter's playroom. He had a daughter named Claude Emma, which he named after himself. And so it was kind of, I guess, the pre Toy Story.
Right.
Isn't it Pixar that did Toy Story?
Yes.
So he, all these toys and dolls and things like coming to life in the playroom. And one of them is Gollywog's Cakewalk. And Gollywog was an African-American doll. And that doll was viewed as inappropriate in the context of today. And so there's been a lot of music schools that have banned performances of Gollywog's Cakewalk, which is an incredible, cute piece. But it's just interesting to like look back at the context of it, because like Claude Debussy, he had no problem writing about all the toys in his daughter's playroom. And there's different things that we have to think about today as a musician and such when it comes to it. But in reflecting on the context that the piece was written, and that it was written out of love and it was written out of charm, I still play it.
Right. Right.
So,
and those have to become personal decisions, that we make for sure. And depending on the context that we're in, that may determine whether or not it's appropriate too. But I think, yes, if we look at the historical context of that, it puts it in a framework. There was no malice intended. Right?
Yeah.
So, we can approach it from that perspective. And I think those are great teaching points for our kids. Things were not always the way they are now, and aren't we blessed? And so isn't it wonderful that it's not that way anymore? But at that time, this is how things were viewed. But now, we understand so much more. And can you imagine there's going to be things that change after us too? Things are
where people will look back on us and be like,
yeah, what were they thinking? Yeah, totally. Yeah. So before we wrap up the conversation, I just want to, and I think we've touched on this, but so writing and performing and illustrating, those do become kind of that full circle moment. So we've gotten some inspiration from somewhere, be it a picture book or, music that we've experienced or art that we've experienced. We get this inspiration, and then we become interested, and then we train, whether it's musically or writing or art. But then comes the place where we get to share that with the world, and that's where that full circle moment comes in, and it becomes a way to share our passion and share a little bit of ourself with the world. And can you comment on that from a musical perspective and how that?
Oh yeah, what a beautiful statement that you just made. Absolutely. It's the same like type of thing with music. And when it comes to being a person who's inspired to create, whether you be a musician or a writer or an artist, I think it's important to embrace failure, because on our journeys, there's always going to be failure, and failure is such a huge teaching point for us. And I feel that in my work so far, that sometimes people have given up a little bit too soon, like kind of right before they hit that magic spot. And I think that it's so important that we encourage failure. I think that in today's society, we don't encourage people to fail enough. We are telling people it's all about achieving, when really the real learning comes from figuring stuff out. And also, as an artist, like there's a quote that I wanted to write down, but I forgot to. But so this is the premise of it. But it's that creation happens in silence. And we're in such a loud, noisy world that we live in. Art gives us a chance to be still and to reflect. And it happens slowly. It happens over years and years and years and years. And maybe somebody will see something and be like, oh, that's it. But sometimes, we expect things to happen faster. And as an artist, we have to embrace the slowness. We have to embrace the process. We have to embrace the journey, and knowing that eventually we're going to get to the point where we're really creating something beautiful that we can be really proud of. And when we get to that point, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. And then we move on to the next project and the next struggle, the next failure.
Right.
It's never ending. Why do we do this to ourselves?
Yeah. Because we love what we do.
It's something about just reaching a point. And I've gotten to that point with pieces before where I keep programming the same piece until I get to a point where it feels done, where I have finally done a great job. And the weird thing is that people at the very beginning thought I did fine.
Right.
So like this point where I'm like, I'm finally ready to move on.
Right.
I think the piece has taught me what it's supposed to. And now I'm ready for another one. And so when people ask like, what's my favorite music or what's my favorite composer? I mean, I can think back to like, of course, some of the favorite pieces that I've played, but it's pretty much always what I'm working on right now.
Right. Right.
I make it my favorite thing.
Exactly. Yeah. One is the thing that you're investing the most in at the moment, and so yeah, you're putting so much of yourself into that at that particular time. I think that's true for us as writers. And I love what you said, with the bit about failure, that some of my writer friends, they collect rejections, like they have a goal. Like I mean, like literally, like my goal is 100 rejections this year because
it
means
shows you're putting something out
that's
there.
right. I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm trying. I'm moving forward in some way. Even if the acceptances don't come, I'm putting my part of the effort in there. And I know eventually, if I do that enough, then I'm gonna find some success. It may be down the road, but it's gonna happen. So
Yeah.
I think you're right. And I love what you said about, creation happens in silence and that it takes time and it's a journey, it's a process. And that's something that we have to remind each other of really often in the writing space as well. And I'm sure in I mean, it's creating. So any creative endeavor is going to have that same piece. So no matter which art or which, piece you're talking about, that's going to be the truth. I mean, that's going to be absolutely true that creation happens in silence and over time, and we have to respect the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, and that's the artistic journey. I feel like it's very much the same no matter what your medium is. Because obviously I was very attracted to sound and particularly like the look, the feel of the harp. I played piano up until high school. And then I was like, you know what? I am just going to focus in on the harp. I have a piano, but it's rarely played. Sometimes I play it a little bit, but the harp was just my thing. And I know that other people have been inspired by that they're, very insightful about words and language, and that's what inspires them, or their eyes are very turned on to the world and they become illustrators and visual artists. And it's so interesting to just see what other people create and kind of what came from them. So,
Yeah.
and then as a musician too, like I have to take other people's art and I have to interpret it and share it too. So in a sense, I'm taking somebody's work and I'm putting it out there as my own version of what I think that they would like to portray. So I try to be very respectful of what they wrote when they're like talking about tempos or they're talking about rhythm or they're talking about crescendos and decrescendos, retardandos, and like all of the various elements that they put in that music to share, usually in French. I have a dictionary.
Yeah.
So, or Italian. And so I try to be really respectful to their wishes, but I also try to make it my own.
Right.
And that's where the real fun starts coming in, I feel like.
Yeah, and that reminds me very much of illustrators in the picture book world
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we write, as authors, only those of us who don't have those beautiful visual artistic skills, like we just write the words, we write the story, but then the illustrators pick up that story. And oftentimes we'll put art notes and we'll say, okay, we want them to be wearing a pink bodysuit or, whatever. And they're like, why? And so same, like I think they try to respect our wishes as the author, but they also have a responsibility to bring their own creativity to that
Yeah.
space to create the best work that we can collectively, pull together. So I have
Yeah, so
a
it's
job, and
it's
so
this
do they.
beautiful pairing
Yeah.
and teamwork that happens in creating something like that. So yeah, when I read picture books and I'm just, the funny illustration next to this beautiful text, it's like, it makes you laugh or it makes you cry or it's like, oh, like
Yeah,
so this beautiful partnership and relationship that this
exactly.
beautiful dance that can happen between creative folks. And the arts
Absolutely.
are such an amazing space to be in.
They really are. And that's such a great place. That comment is just a great place to end this, because that's my goal with PBJamz, is to bring all these pieces together, the picture books and the music and the teaching, which we haven't talked a lot about, but teaching is an art form
Oh,
within
yes.
itself, and again, we're bringing all those things that have been shared, but we're making it our own, and we're sharing it with students in sometimes a totally different way than how it came to us. And so all those arts come together, the reading, the writing, the art, the music, the teaching. And that was my hope with PBJams, was to bring all those pieces together and give all of those audiences a little something to grab hold of and to build upon and to work together to make something really fantastic, whether it's in the classroom or between the pages of a picture book, or as a musician or as a music teacher. So, yeah, I'm still very committed. That's become, we were talking earlier about your passion and how you don't care what anybody thinks, or you don't care. And so, PB Jams is
Everybody cares a little bit about what people think, but I try not to think about it too much.
but there are those places where you get to and you just know, like, I've done the best I can, and if people don't like it, I mean, okay, like you do
Yeah.
get to that place. And like PBJams has been such a labor of love and a passion project for me, but the audience is still pretty small. Like, I don't have this big huge audience, and I've had people who have said, "No, I'm not going to come be on your show because you just don't have enough following," and I'm like, I mean, okay, I respect that, but my book is my debut picture book is coming out next year. I can say
Yay.
next year now. Yay,
Congratulations.
thank you. Yes, so exciting. And it's been such a long, arduous journey, right? But
Oh yeah, that's great art.
oh yeah. But
Not it's commitment.
it's commitment. It is real, and it's patience. It is so much patience, more than you
Mm.
have any idea of if you're not in this business. But there's a place where you're like, okay, I know my plate's already full, and it's going to get fuller, and can I still do this with integrity and efficacy and launch my book and do all the other things that I'm already doing? And so, there was a place where I was really second guessing whether I wanted to continue PB Jams or not. Like, can
Mhm.
I continue to do this and give it 100%? And then I I talked with some friends and I got some feedback, and I was like, you know what? I can't stop this even if I wanted to, because I love it so much, right? And this is exactly what we're talking about as an artist. Like, there comes a place where you decide, I'm going to do this because I love this. And it doesn't matter if anybody listens to my music, doesn't matter if anybody reads my book, it doesn't matter if anybody tunes into PBJams. Like, I get joy out of sitting down and talking with people about books and music and teaching, and like, that fills my cup, and then I can pour from the overflow. And if other people want to come alongside and they want to watch and they want to tune in and they want to take what they can and put it into their life and share that back out, great. And I hope they do, and I want my audience to grow. But if it doesn't, what matters is that I, and hopefully you today and my other guests along the way, have had an amazing conversation where we've grown as people. I've made friends on PB Jams that I never would have met any other way. I mean, and so that is a gift. Like, that's a gift to me. And so it's a gift I'm willing to give myself, even if the audience doesn't grow. And maybe at some point, like you said, there may be a time where I go, okay, I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to leave this behind, but it's not right now because
Yeah.
still I'm still getting joy from it. And I hope I'm able to share that with at least a few people along the way.
Yeah. And you never know what you say or what somebody might see that might resonate with
Right.
them. And I think that's my story of reading that picture book. I mean, someone had the intention of creating that space for young children to sit there. Somebody that had the intention of choosing books to put there.
Yeah.
And someone also who I don't know had the intention of writing that book, and that creative thing that ignited and sparked a career path for me, connecting me to my artistic voice, which I express here through the harp. And so I think sometimes you just put out there what you love, and then, or what you feel that is needed.
Yeah.
And then it could spark something, just like that Because book
That's
that
right.
isn't even anticipated. And I think that's what's the beautiful story of that book, which
Yeah.
was like brought a tear to my eye, because I was like, I can completely relate to that.
Yeah,
Oh
exactly.
my gosh.
Yes.
Who is this person? Who is Mo Willems?
Yeah. Yeah.
So beautiful.
It is. It's so ironic too, like you were saying, who is this Mo Will? It's so funny to think that he's also the writer of Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus and
Oh
Elephant
no.
and Elephant and Piggy, which are, I mean, totally different, but then there's this beautiful, beautiful, and not
Yeah, it's
any shade on
heartfelt,
those,
like,
but yeah, they're just very different feelings. But yes,
yeah.
this is one of my favorites of his for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
so excited for those that watch this podcast to be able to see that book and maybe see themselves in it. Just like
Yeah.
I started to see myself after the beginning where it's kind of confused. And I was like, oh,
Oh, it does
it
relate.
makes it so okay. Like, even if it's the flyer that I put out there,
That's right.
even if it's this or that, like my impact might be something that I can't even predict.
That's right.
So, but congratulations on your 3 years of
Thank
doing
you.
podcasts and putting together content. And you have so much to be proud of and all that you have done. So, I mean, it's wonderful that this is a space that brings you such joy and connection. And we all need that.
We all benefit from it. That's right. Well, thank you so much. I should mention too that so I'm going to link up all the information for Grace so you can find her and check out her music and all of that. And also, she has graciously offered to do a virtual school visit for some lucky winner, and we're going to double the winners this episode since it is an anniversary episode. I'm going to offer up a copy of the book Because for one lucky winner. So we're going to have two double lucky winners for this episode. So make sure you leave a comment on the blog itself. If you're catching this on YouTube, make sure you go to the blog. It's in the description and leave a comment there. And the deadline will be posted. And so I think it's going to be right at the end of February, if I remember right. But it'll be a Wednesday. That'll be the cutoff date. And leave that comment, and we will choose two lucky winners. And I'll be sharing so much fun content related to Because and music and harp in particular in honor of Grace. So check out all those teaching tips and all the fun things that we have to share. And we hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we have. So thank
Yes. And if the
you.
school is close enough to Greensboro, I'm happy to come in person too.
Nice.
In
That would
person's
be
always good.
always better. Yeah, always better for sure. So we would love to share that with you. So leave a comment and check Grace out and check out that article. I'll link the article as well so you can
Oh
enjoy
yeah, great.
that. Yeah, and be inspired like I was and like she was from this lovely picture book. And by the way, if you happen to know that picture book, Grace is still
Yes.
searching to find
Tell
that.
me.
So please put that in the comment if you know. We've done some searching. We can't officially find it, so we would love to connect with that picture book as
I
well.
know. Right now, it's just that random thing just lives in my memory.
Yeah. So y'all check it out and let us know if you know what it is, and we would love that. So thank
Solve
you,
the
Grace.
mystery.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. And thank you guys. And we'll see you next time on PBJamz.
Jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. Welcome, everybody, to PBJamz. Music and picture books. What a perfect sandwich. Squish them all together. What a yummy snack. PBJamz. Yummy books and music. PBJamz. Reading, writing, teaching. PBJamz. What a yummy treat. Jamming PBs all the time. PBJamz. Songish books and bookish songs. Tips for music